live on Facebook. So there are a couple of attendees actually viewing it from Facebook. May I have all the panelists switching on their video, please? Awesome. So we have three speakers here, Sebastian, Vidi, and Fang.
Hey everyone.
Hey everyone.
Hi.
Okay, awesome. So let's get started. I think we have a couple more trickling in. Feel free to press the Q&A button to fill in your questions as we go. And if the panelists want to answer those questions, then they'll just pick it up along the way. So first thing first, we will be looking at some of the questions that we have. First question is, during COVID-19, which is currently where we're all facing right now, what are the trends do you see in terms of tech adoption and market insights? Perhaps we can, when any of the panelists start, please give a short, brief introduction about yourself, and then you can go ahead and start with the question. Maybe Seth, we can start first.
Also a law tech specialist. I've been involved in legal technology for quite a few years now. So, this is going to be my sort of perspective. Should I just launch into it, or would there be introductions from other panelists? Okay, I'll go straight to it. So I think I could see definitely three key areas as law firms and legal practitioners go into COVID-19. Of course, top of mind is remote working, so working from home, how to implement policies about distance work overnight or over a couple of days for entire firms to get online and work from that basis and maintain social distancing policies for some time. And now the rules have been relaxed a little bit. Most firms have what we call like A/B teams, where half of the firm would go into the office on certain days of the week. So, maintaining, what were workflows that required in-person collaboration, how to maintain client relationships when most firms are not either sort of receiving clients or clients receiving legal advisors going to visit them. That's obviously a huge challenge and something that technology can help, but at the same time it's also about having flexible rules and processes within the company to deal with that. Additionally, we've seen obviously practice changes going into global recession, as we're sort of now foreseeing. We're definitely seeing more disputes, especially for those which have a civil and commercial practice, whether it's commercial litigation, arbitration, mediation, and as well as employment disputes and also business restructuring, right? As those which may be considering insolvency or bankruptcy is going to be top of mind. However, with the health driven global crises we are all facing, it also means that a lot of our courts are shut down, right? And it has been like that everywhere in many countries over the world, where there may be some limitations or even sort of complete closures of courts. And we've certainly experienced that in Hong Kong, where our general adjournment period only finished early in May. So there's a huge backlog of cases to be dealt with. But at the same time, there's been implementation of remote hearing, more adoption of video conferencing, things for limited types of matters, mostly against civil business kind of matters. So criminal and other aspects are not necessarily facilitated in that regard. And then lastly, I think in terms of seeing streamlined teams, right? As many firms are seeing challenges in terms of maintaining their costs, cost control, and having uncertainties about revenue streams and so forth. A lot of partners, for example, are putting on hold their drawings, as well as employees, asked to either take a cut or certain unpaid leave, and that also has knock-on effects about what kind of capacities firms can deal with. If there is an upswing of cases and things like that coming through, what does that mean in terms of firms dealing with that? There's also, obviously an element of technology that can support it, but on the other hand, it's also a matter of process and people's mindsets in dealing with that as well. Yeah, so that's kind of my take on this issue.
Okay, Fang here from Fort Ninja. So I focus primarily on, I guess, growing businesses. And I've come from the airline industry, banking, insurance, and online poker industry. So I guess that's where these opinions are coming from. So I think everybody's worked from home during this coronavirus period with the social distancing measures. Proactiveness, I think, is being rewarded right now for businesses who are prepared and who have prepared their staff to work autonomously from their homes. I think it's where this impact really has made a huge difference is on whether or not these firms have done their homework, right? You look at companies like PwC over here in Australia, and they were able to mobilize their entire staff to work from home over a 2-week period and to increase things like VPN and to be able to their usage for VPN services increased by 75% because they already had that conversation with their tech partners to provide that service. I think more flexibility for employees. This is particularly on the trust of driving results as opposed to just pushing your pen and getting showing that you're doing work. You actually have to deliver results, and this comes in with the company's culture and whether or not it's something where it can be measured from a KPI basis, even when your staff are working remotely. I think going paperless is one aspect of it, but in another aspect, this lockdown has also increased the use of paper, and this is what I mean by that is cashless payments obviously has been encouraged by a lot of vendors. You look at e-signatures, that has been fairly popular as well. But also with the shutdown, a lot of paper packaging products for home delivery and food delivery has been on the rise. So does that balance each other out? Not quite sure over that, but it's certainly a trend. Cyber attacks have increased. There, I think, has been news of a big DDoS attack in the US. Some say it is a DDoS attack. Some say it's just a failure on the telecommunications provider side, and it's a much bigger problem that they are facing, and it's a more complex problem that they are facing right now. But I think the focus overall is with all this additional time, instead of going to and fro work, I think a lot of people are focusing on self-development. You get universities like Stanford and Harvard and all these Ivy League universities giving free courses. Masterclass has come online, and that's definitely increased its number of usage, but clients coming on board, and then the Google Cloud certifications and all that are currently being discounted in Malaysia. So I think there's only so much Netflix and cat videos you can watch. A lot of the focus is going to be on self-development. That's my take.
Thank you. I think let's move on to the next question, which is where Vidi will start and also introduce herself. In adopting technology, which areas do you think that we have done well and other areas that we could have done much better? Vidi?
Hi everyone again. My name is Vidi. I'm from Fort Ninja, mainly focusing on the tech and cybersecurity area. So I will talk in the tech perspective, something that done better because I've been working in the tech most of my life, is that actually most of the countries, they are putting more investment on the law tech now, which is a good thing because people are embracing the law tech. Like from the Forbes on 2018, they said that in US itself, there's a 700% jump in investment compared to 2017 in law tech. Means that many people are investing on that area. And also in Europe in 2019, there are around 1,250 startups on the law tech, just because there is a lot of needs from the law firms, and then they need to cater that needs. So a lot of startup coming on, and then basically it means that law tech are mature and robust enough that most of the law firms can use. In American itself, there's already 58% based on the American Bar Society, the one that do the survey, saying that 58% of the law firm is actually already using the law tech to support their business. And also in Australia, we already have something called PEXA. It's a e-conveyancing tools that has been used by many law firms to do the house settlement. And then it's really useful during this COVID-19. That's why real estate in Australia never suffer from this issue, because you have a tools to cater all that needs, meaning that everything is done better already on the law tech. You don't need to worry about the security anymore. But then coming another issue, what can be done better is that regulation lack from the country or between countries. Like many law techs, they try to compete with other law tech by doing innovation, making a new features to compete in the market. But mostly the regulation, they can't catch up with this one. So they end up just doing certain features to cater certain needs on certain country or region that we can't really grow that much. And then this is caused the issue that there are so many law techs out there. There are many pretty good ones, but then most of them probably useless in your country because it's outside your regulation area, or they can't cater the needs on your country. That's basically my perspective on the tech area.
And what about Seth? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, just follow up with VD first, and then going into what I observe also from around Asia Pacific. So definitely, I think how quickly legal tech can be adopted in legal practices. A lot of it depends on whether the regulations permit. Electronic signatures and execution of transactions online is so critical, right? I've seen many of my colleagues and practitioners who are handling transactions which have been planned for before COVID-19, but they need to complete during the COVID-19 period, like a real estate or maybe an M&A and a commercial transaction. Depending on the area of law, electronic signatures may or may not be enforceable, or it may not be valid for the legal documentation involved. And certainly, in Hong Kong, for example, real estate and conveyancing kind of transactions is not, it's not supported by their deeds, and there are other kind of legal documentation where the legal reform needs to happen before this needs to take place. So even for transactions that just simply involves parties from the same jurisdiction, that hasn't been an issue. And if you're involving cross jurisdictions, cross-border kind of transactions, it is even more of a headache, right? Where multiple laws may be involved, some may be a little bit more liberal and allow certain adoption for technologies. So that's interesting. So moving on to the observations and trends that I see in terms of technologies that's worked well and what not so well in the legal sector space. It's interesting, I think, to see a recent survey done by a software vendor that 77% of legal practices all over the world are seeing a huge increase in IT spending. And I think breaking that down into sort of seeing whether the story gels at a ground level is quite interesting. I know, in Singapore and in Hong Kong as well, from what I see, a lot of that actually goes into projects that were already planned for, digitization, digital transformation, going paperless projects, not necessarily involving specialized legal tech. It may just be, a general kind of like OCR scanning and, all these sort of tools, but better, accelerating the timeline for implementing this. And relying a lot on the IT experts to accelerate these projects have been, a huge drive of this IT spending over the last couple of months. And of course, it's a huge endeavor to undertake. But this is also hopefully will lay some good foundations, not only for survival for the businesses during COVID times, but beyond that. And so that's the kind of high level view. In particular, as I mentioned, e-signature online collaboration tools is a great uptake in that. So that's very positive. But to the extent that the regulations and laws allow it, of course.
Thank you, Seb. I think we'll move on to the meat of the crux of this session. The third question that we're going for is, how will our concern for data privacy, cybersecurity, and because we're also balancing with convenience as well out of tech adoption, how do we map that in the future between our concern and balancing with the convenience of adopting tech? Maybe we can start off with VD.
Okay, before I talk about balancing stuff, I will talk about cybersecurity attacks first. Like most of the attack on cybersecurity, cybersecurity attacks nowadays is something rather like ransomware, malware, or phishing, which is like in a week, at least one of the attack on a company is one of those. And then we know that that attack comes because there is no procedures for employee to follow. So they are using their company tools for personal usage. Like they have a working email and then they use it to subscribe to an online store, so they get a discount. You know, they send an email to their friends, a cat photos or whatever it is to their friends, and then this is causing that working email to circulate around the internet. And then on the cybersecurity area, like we keep telling hackers that hackers is a really good people. They probably know you better than your wife or husband or your family, because they actually search your social media. They search everything, your digital footprints, just to know you better. They know you more 6 years ago than your wife. So that's a good thing about hacker. So then that's the way they replicate an email to attack you, putting a link for you to click, or they become a company and then ask you to give them sensitive information. That's where the attack comes from. So in order to balance the tech adoptions and cybersecurity, we need to go to the basic one, which is in order for an employee to use the tech properly, there should be a good governance by a company. So in auditing, the security auditing, we have a term called GRC, which is a governance, risk, and compliance, where the compliance needs to be on the top, risk on the bottom, and then the governance is the bridge between the compliance and the risk itself. So like I said, if you put the risk on the top, and then, for example, you are trying to build an asbestos as a fence, you are thinking about the risk of using asbestos, and then you don't even check the compliance of your country when the country is saying, well, we don't allow asbestos everywhere in this country. So you're just wasting your time to check a risk that's not even existed in your country. So that's why we need to do that. By using a good governance, you're creating a proper guidelines, step-by-step procedures for an employee to follow. And then after that, you keep checking them if the compliance are being used not regularly, and then check the compliance also regularly, and then maintain the procedures and guidelines to follow that one. So that's what I'm thinking in the future, is the governance needs to be there by the top management of the company.
Thanks, Vidi. And maybe Fang can jump in on this.
Yeah, sure. I think there's no dispute here. Tech is the way forward. I think a lot of firms want to get that competitive advantage on welcoming more clients and doing more business, right? But it's just like renovating your house. If all the walls come down and all your valuables are still in the middle of the house and that goes unprotected, then criminals will pilfer and take advantage of the situation. So this happened with one of the finance companies locally here in Adelaide. They changed IT service providers because obviously they were attracted by the features that the new system would provide. But they got hit by a ransomware attack and they had to pull in another IT firm that was, I guess, better, more prepared to handle these attacks. And unfortunately, there's a court case that will take from this incident. So businesses, I think, will focus a lot more on more complete outcomes. And I think these businesses will demand a lot more from their service providers. To strike that balance between, I guess, getting better features and on the other side, keeping your data private and cybersecurity defenses up to a respectable standard. I think that's a case of what needs to happen right now. Potentially, there could be a new opportunity. Maybe Seb can chime in on this one. But I think there will be quite a lot of tech litigations with a lot of it's when a bad incident happens, who is to blame, and I think the blame game will be quite a conversation that's going to happen more frequently with the number of cyber attacks that are occurring. Yeah, it's just a hunch right now, but possibly a new specialization might emerge, just like how IP law evolved during the .com era. And I think it's a trade-off on convenience versus security. So you look at 5G networks being rolled out, that just makes things faster. Faster to what? Faster to being possibly attacked faster. But I think things like IoT as well, with the Mirai botnet, I think that happened, I think in 2016. That was actually quite smart, because a lot of the IoT devices that came out of the box had a default password and a default logging, and that's what the Mirai bot exploited. And if you look at this year alone, 2020, you're looking at 20 billion IoT devices that are available and being used. The global population is at 7 billion, so essentially that means 3 devices per human on Earth right now. And in 2025, it's expected to reach 75 billion connected IoT devices. So yeah, interesting times, definitely.
Yeah, definitely echo that. I think as yes, from I think not only legal sector but different industries as well, as we adopt more highly networked devices and adoption of cloud-based tools and whatnot, the risk profile changes, right? So obviously some bad comes with the good, and it's a matter of changing your risk management methodologies, including cybersecurity, to manage that. And because of the sort of wider range of stakeholders and devices involved in more sort of network setups, we're also seeing, in addition to perhaps disputes, we're also seeing cyber insurance as a huge growth in industry as well, where people thought like an incident, a data breach, for example, whether it's due to a hacking or due to negligence of internal staff, it's not an if anymore, but it's a when, right? Each year, I think Microsoft has a great study every year updating on this, how many times it would occur for large corporations, for small corporations, and for each file leaked, what is the monetary value to a business. So that's definitely top of mind now for law firms as ever. For law firms and legal practitioners as well, client confidentiality is obviously a very high prioritized duty of ours, and we deal with sensitive data all the time, whether it's in terms of our clients' trade secrets, business strategies, and so forth, and also privacy, data privacy issues that we have to adhere to as well. So all of this together, and the recent increasing incidents, cyber incidents, that has obviously become a very priority issues. Just earlier this year in January, 5 US law firms were suffered from a ransomware attack within the course of 24 hours. And then again in May, also a very high profile entertainment law firm, which counts many Hollywood big stars as their clients, was also suffered from a ransomware attack as well. And each one of these, on average, $1 to $2 million US dollars called in ransom for retrieval of the passwords, of retrieval of the files, and destructions of any copies held by the hackers themselves, right? So these things, of course, is a big issue. But one thing I think a lot of legal professionals are getting on top of as well is it's no longer just let's call the IT experts. When it comes to very technical issues, of course, we need to rely on consultants and cybersecurity experts. But on a hygiene level, what I call like cyber hygiene, that's everybody has a duty, right, to make sure that we're not clicking into phishing emails and doing our parts, right, to make sure these processes are observed properly. There are a couple of questions from the chat as well, but let us turn back to that later on. Just want to let the audience know. Yeah.
Thanks, Seb. Let's move on to the next question. I think this is targeted to Vidi. In technical perspective, what do you think is the best practice in doing your work, from home, or maybe using your devices?
Okay, I will return to the question 3 where I said that it's important for the company top management to have the proper guidelines for the employee to follow. But I know during this COVID-19, most of the companies, they are not ready. They are not prepared for that one. So I'm giving you a basic procedures that you need to follow just to ensure that you are safe or secure enough. So one of the main thing that people always forget is do the regular checking of the updates for the operating system or the tools they are using. It's really important for you to update the latest patch as soon as possible. And most of the companies, no matter what you're using, Microsoft, if you're using Mac, even Linux, which I don't think people are using unless they are techie, so they update their system regularly. That's really important because they know what's the latest hole there that needs to be patched. Also, you need to have an antivirus. Most of the operating system has a good one, like Windows, they have Windows Defender, which is already pretty sophisticated to protect Microsoft right now. Make sure you turn it on. If you turn on Defender, you also need to turn on the firewall, which come out in a package, so you don't need to worry about that usually. And then never use your working emails for personal stuff, no matter how big the discount on the online store. Ignore that one. Use your personal email. If you need another email, make another one. Never use your working email. And use a strong password for your devices and your accounts. And regularly update that one every certain months, usually 3 months or 6 months. And there's a way to make your life easier. There are many offline. There's a password manager out there. I give you one suggestion, is a KeePass. That's one of the famous one that most of the tech company are using. There's also, make sure if you forget to change the password or update the patch, and then you always forget, and then your company never reminds you, make sure you have a daily you have your own personal notification, put the calendar notifications, give yourself a heads up saying, hey, restart your computer, it's already 7 days. Hey, check the updates, there must be something you need to update. Or hey, change your password, it's been 6 months, you never change your password. Or whatever it is, to make sure you make yourself safe and you make sure your company safe. You don't want to bring your company down with you. That's the important thing. And there are so many preventions out there, advanced. There's an encryption on the emails to make sure only the receiving ends can open that email, or when it's not done, it will be just a scrambled text. There is also an encryption for the hard disk. So when your device gets stolen, someone tried to open it, they can't because it's encrypted, which is needs more time to explain. So we talk it on the later days because of the time limitation. So mostly a general one that you need to follow.
Hey, Vivi, quick question to follow up on that. So if you're storing all your passwords in one place, what if that place gets hacked, or if you lose your device, what happens then?
Yeah. So yeah, that's why always suggesting an offline password manager. There are many password managers out there. There's LastPass, they call it. They're storing your password on the internet, on the cloud, which is I'm not suggesting you to do because it's easily hackable. So if you're putting on offline one, if your device got stolen, yeah, the password gone with it. That's why you need another protection, which is encryption on the hard disk, but it will take more time to explain on how to do it. But pretty sure offline will make your life safe.
Okay, I think we have one last question before we address the attendees' question. I think, will new business models emerge during and post COVID-19 in APAC, and how will we live our lives to the new norm? Maybe let's start with Fang.
Yeah, sure. I think things like new business models, globalized recruitment, and what I mean by this is, I think when people are operating from their homes and operating remotely, suddenly businesses are now aware that, hey, do I really need to have an office? I think there are a number of telco companies here that have already decided to have permanent arrangements for people to work from home. But I think the bigger implication here is, can that job be done by somebody offshore? And if all things being the same in terms of the output of the work, surely businesses will look for the lowest cost possible. And given that people have the ability to drive results while working from home, and that's something which a lot of businesses are considering now. I think it will also mean that professionals, be it engineering firms or accountants and doctors to a certain extent, is the rise of the freelancer model, right? Where a lot of sole practitioners will have the ability to deliver on their results on their own. I think upskilling will play a vital role for this moving forward, and it's how to get this sorted out. I think during the coronavirus period, when the medical a lot of clinics were closed because of the shutdown. Telehealth services increased dramatically, over 300%. I read in a report. So I think definitely freelancers that have the ability to drive the result is going to be very popular. It's not a matter of having a paper or a degree that says you can do the job, but it's your ability to drive the outcome for the company, which is going to really matter. And I think possibly online training, that's been on the uptrend as well. So I think, yeah, that's going to be really, really popular. I think the use of better technology as well. I think things like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all these are just the introductory phase for a lot of people to communicate better. But I think one company that has been, even before all this happened, has already been at the forefront of that communication side of things, and they've even developed their own technology on this, and that's Rising Sun Pictures down here in Adelaide, where they specialize in visual effects. They've made the visual effects for movies like X-Men and Game of Thrones and Captain Marvel recently. And what's really interesting about their technology is not only are they able to communicate and discuss like what we're doing right now on Zoom, but they are actually able to have technical visual discussions on how to storyboard, make the changes, and visual effects discussions and corrections live, because obviously with movies there's a editing process, and time is money, and they got about 200 staff all working on this live across boundaries, across geographical areas. So I think that's where I think a lot of the focus is going to be on.
Thanks, Fang. I think in the interest of time, we'll go to the last question straight away. How do we make better tech adoption happen? Perhaps Seb, you can go ahead and start first.
Yeah, and this sort of dovetails with a great question from Jen from the audience. I think in times of crisis, whether it's pandemic or otherwise, many businesses, legal sector included, are very much focused on business survival. But so at the best of times, finding the budget to improve your technologies or improve your efficiencies is difficult, especially in busy practices. But in the times of difficulty, to say that you need upfront investments in order to grow your business or to sort of survive, then where do you prioritize with that? That's a very critical, and it's not an easy question to answer. But McKinsey actually released a report back in May, just last month, about the fact that for the legal sector especially, they do see a lot of reshuffling of rankings amongst law firms coming out of crises. So every sort of risk has its opportunities, it's a silver lining. And where businesses can really develop their client relationships, whether it's adopting different business models and so forth, is going to determine whether they're going to come out of this well and maybe even better than their peers going into the issues. So focusing on obviously the client needs, right, being driven on especially the top line revenue level sort of priorities, is probably going to be the sort of types of technologies and business efficiency improvements that we'll see. So that might be a lot of like client collaboration, document review sort of issues, sort of technologies that would help with that. So yeah, that's definitely a key key area for improvement, as well as we're going to see a lot more adoption of alternative fee arrangements, fixed price engagements, and so forth, as our end clients, right, look for certainty in going into this global recession.
Thanks, Seb. And maybe a very brief one from Fang and Vidi.
Yeah, I can go first. I think my short answer would be training. I think training is going to be very big. Just like the first question I mentioned, that I think being prepared is not just about having the tools and having the robust internet at home and all that. I think to make sure that your staff and you yourself are trained to use all these different technology, and I think that's where you can create a big difference and potentially get a huge competitive advantage as well.
From my side, it's mostly research and compliance. Make sure you know what is regulated in your country, what is it compliance, is ethics and everything. You need to make sure your company has capabilities to use it and to maintain it, not just buy it but never update it. So that's important. So the preparation for that environment, preparation for the team to actually use it in the proper way, that's really important there. So that's what I'm thinking, to make sure you adopt a tech in the better way.
And I think we have a couple of questions. I think, Seb, you want to address a couple of that? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, to jumpstart sort of budgeting and focus for tech investments, whether it's the products themselves or training or services, consultation to lift your game in this area. It's good to see that all over the world there are COVID relief funding from the government. In Hong Kong, for example, there is the Law Tech Fund from the government, which specifically targets small law firms, 5 fee earners or less, and for them to improve their tech adoption. And then there are other schemes, right, which are industry agnostic as well. So obviously, in the long term, you want to have the business case, right? You want to be able to make it economically sustainable, and to justify your tech spend. You want to see that return on investments. But in the meantime, to have these funds to jumpstart, it helps lift people's mindsets, not just focus on survival, but also plan a little bit longer, midterm, long term as well. So hopefully that answers the question from the audience.
And I think we have two questions that we roughly covered, but maybe you can go through some of it. I think this is on cybersecurity. What are the must-have measures that any law firms should adopt? Vidi?
Yeah, to answer that one, it's really hard to tell because cybersecurity is not one thing. It's actually an integrated system. So it's like you having a doors and you having windows. You try to make sure your windows secure. You put 10 locks there, but your windows is just a glass. Someone just throw a rock and then they can get into your house. So the must have measures there is that you need to have an integrated system. There's no way for you to just regularly update your system, but then your employee use their work emails for personal use. And then there is no use for you to use the working emails for work purpose, but then your password is password, or 1 2 3 4 5 7 6 7 8, or your date of birth, or your wife's name, or your pet's name, kid's name, whatever. It's so easy to hack. So that's why it's really hard to tell which one must have. Then you need to know everything, do everything, and then maintain everything in one go.
Also to chime in, I think for the tips which we shared just now, they're all really relevant. Updating to make sure that you got the latest updates, restart your computer after you've left it on for a couple of days. And the reason is because you want to make sure that you make it harder from a cybersecurity angle. You make it harder for the hacker to target you. And automatically what that means is they refocus on a simpler target. So just like any sort of a crime, you see a vulnerable person crossing the street at night, that's who you go after because that's the easy target. So don't make yourself an easy target. Make it a little bit more difficult with the tips and which is within your own ability to take care of.
All right, I think thanks, Fang. And maybe Seth, do you have anything to chip in with the one last question talking about digital transformation? What are the basic legal tech that any law firms, especially the small firms, should explore or adopt?
Yeah, definitely. I think it flows from my previous comment that it really depends on your practice area, what you specialize in, right? So a practice that's more focused on dispute resolution, on litigation, arbitration, mediation, versus one that's more transactional, or maybe one that's more advisory, may look very different. But at the end of the day, whether you're a small firm or large firm, and in fact, small firms have got great opportunities to almost leverage technology as a leveler or an equalizer to increase their capacity to do more work is a great thing. And it's definitely something that all practitioners should think about. We've recently relied a lot more on remote hearings, electronic submissions, and so forth. So I hear a lot of colleagues in the profession thinking about, upgrading their systems for this purpose. But then you have to ask yourself, how many times would you be engaging your cases on a remote hearing basis, right? In Hong Kong, it's very much that the procedures are directed from the court, so it's not something that the parties at this stage, can petition for. So, whether you can do this on a higher lease basis, right, compared to sort of buying it outright and thinking more flexibly around how you would invest and how you'd want to spend that IT budget. It's going to be a pretty sort of tailored thing to your own businesses. I think also another good thing to think about from other industries, to draw lessons from other industries, is that traditionally for small, medium-sized companies, companies should be looking at about 1 to 2% of their annual revenue for their IT spend, and if not more than that for small, medium-sized companies. In legal sector, actually the spend on average is lower than that. So is it not now time to think about increasing the budget, to think about midterm to longer term kind of return on investments? I think that's certainly something that we should all reflect on what's done, what could be done better, and what's been done well, given how practices have set up to meet business continuity and disaster recovery needs.
Thanks, Seb. And I think just to share with everyone, I think you saw the poll. We have upcoming workshops that are going live soon. And if anyone is keen, please check out the website, fortninja.com, and you'll be able to inquire which workshop that you're going for. So I think let's wrap up. We have a couple more minutes more. Let's wrap up in terms of one last thought regarding our title today. Maybe we can start with Vidi first.
Okay, during this COVID-19, as part of the tech teams, and then seeing so many investment coming on to the tech, many companies starting to implement tech, there's no denial that we need to have you need to use tech at some point, either now or later on after this COVID-19. Many of the business I've seen is just using a bare minimum. They just use like Cloud, Google Drive, just to make sure they can survive. But we know that many other companies, they are willing to go even further than that. And then when this COVID-19 finish, that company will have a head start. So yeah, I'm thinking like it's now or never to actually implement law tech. And that's why you need to learn more on how to actually implement a proper one. Yeah, that's from me.
Thanks, Vidi. And maybe Fang, you can get started and then Seb.
Sure. I think just to chime what Vidi said, I think tech is always going to be, regardless of whether you're an engineering firm. Some articles even speculate that architects might be out of a job because with the available CAD drawings and drafts technology, draftsperson technology, engineers are going to take over that role and really make sure you cannot be replaced by automation. I think that's a big key, and a big aspect of that is to be proactive in taking on tech. And I think training is a very, very big part of it. Either you use this as a lesson point where everybody's affected and you learn from it and see what the people ahead of the curve are doing and respond to it that way, or the change will come again and you might not be prepared for it. Those that are prepared will not only weather the storm, but I think they will capitalize on the available market space created by people who did not survive the crisis. So yeah, I think go for training and take a proactive move.
Thanks, Fang.
Yeah.
And what about Seb?
Yeah, I echo Fang's sentiments. I think upskilling and learning about tech is not just for the tech experts or those who are, the geeks who love to know about technologies and passionate about technologies anyway. It's really for everybody, today. And, it's about asking the right questions, not necessarily everybody learning how to code or learning how to, develop your own software, but asking the right questions. So when there are challenges coming up, you know who to speak with and what kind of questions to ask them. And I think coming from a highly regulated sector, there tends to be kind of large pendulum swings, from people who are very conservative. They have to know everything about how to cover all the different kinds of risks before experimenting and choosing kind of certain kind of tools and products, to those who are, because of the COVID-19 crisis, there's if you don't use the technology, you can't do business, you can't open the doors at all. And then, kind of figure out the cybersecurity issues later. You don't want to be caught in, I think, either extremes, right? And either sort of be driven out by the competition or, disrupted in other ways in your workflows and in your operations. Be proactive and prepare ahead of time. Learn about the issues. I think that's the best way to go forward. Thanks.
Thanks, Seb. And I think that wraps up. I think we wanted to be on time because we're quite mindful that people just got off work and supposed to head for dinner. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thanks, panelists. And we will definitely forward you if you want more information of our upcoming webinars and workshop. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.